Well, take on me. Yes, we have Lindsay Farris, aka Dalton, from this season's Ash vs. Evil Dead, up next.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AfterBuzz TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
I know, we just gotta let the song marinate there. Like when it gets to this part.
How much can we play before we have to pay for it?
I don't know. I think we should be allowed to play the whole thing. But, you know, before we get way too into this song, I am your host, Lacretia Lyon here, and next to me is...
I'm Lex Michael. Hi.
All right, and our special guest today is Lindsay Farris.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you so much for being here. Let's just get right into it. Dalton is a new mysterious character that you play on Ash vs. Evil Dead, and he's a Knight of Sumeria. Were you familiar at all with the Army of Darkness lore surrounding that?
Yeah, well, look, when I was a kid, my grandmother used to show me two films on Betamax. One of them was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
One of my favorite films of all time.
But the original, so there's like, it's gruesome, it's gritty, it's like pixelated because I'm, 20 years in the past odd, and this giant man's bashing through a wall and just hacking young people to death with chainsaws.
So cool.
And I'm 14 going, oh wow, this is fun, Grandma. What's the other show? And it's Evil Dead. And so the first time that I experienced this sort of franchise was back then, and then 20 years later I'm walking into the TV set. And it's interesting when you throw back, because I kind of delved right into the world. One of the first ever Knights of Sumeria was Sam Raimi. If you go back to the original films, he's the first guy that goes and pulls his little helmet visor up and goes, hey, who are you, So yeah, it's just building up on that world that was introduced back then.
Yeah, and that's what's so cool about Ash and this whole Evil Dead world is there is a lot of lore that they've created to pull from that has even been, inspired in other TV shows as well. So what does it feel like to be a part of such a huge phenomenon?
Look, I think my favorite thing about it is that it's still Rob Tapert, Bruce Campbell, and Sam Raimi that are making the content. It hasn't gone into a spin-off world where you've got people that are, brand new producers, directors that don't have that same essence, because it was one of their first projects, and it's still going this far on. So you've got all these guys that are still helming the thing. And originally my first favorite shows were those that were horror, that blended live action prosthetics and blood and gore, like Peter Jackson's early on, it's called Brain Dead. I think it's called Dead Alive.
Yeah, Dead Alive over here. And it's so good.
Yeah, you've got him busting through a door with a lawnmower, just hacking zombies to death.
That's my favorite part, because there's more blood everywhere. Yeah. I'm like, it's so gross, but I'm like, I loved it as a kid.
Because it's an entire genre of its own, You've got that slasher, very limited sort of CG. I mean, these are the early days of CG. And like computer graphics, and so they're in it. And that's the beautiful blend about this franchise, I think, because it still does that, And in the episode 302 that we kind of just saw, you've still got these live action prosthetics. It's not just a CGI baby that's a blue thing an actor's trying to hold and just work with. Like, they're puppets, and it's, Henson-esque in it, in that way, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's why I love this show. I actually much prefer the stuff that has a little bit of realism, not too much CGI. And then this is just blood and guts everywhere. I mean, people even CGI blood now. Why?
I know. Why?
Yeah.
Like in teardrop blood.
Yeah.
CG squibs are always real ugly.
Ugh.
Real ugly.
Yeah.
Real ugly.
Yeah, really, really ugly. And I get the practical necessity for doing them, right? You can do it as many times as you need to. You don't have to worry about resetting the squibs every time. But man, they're just hideous.
Yeah, it's just like, you know what, I want it real. I want as much, and then as you said with puppets, have you gotten to play with Ashy Slashy yet?
I haven't gotten to play with Ashy Slashy yet. I have seen a lot of fan pictures of Ashy Slashies being puppeted in various states of appropriate or inappropriate forms. But no, I don't have one myself, I'm afraid. I have to reach out to Starz, maybe.
Yeah, maybe they can get you an Ashy Slashy, and we would also like one as well. Those puppets are amazing. And who puts the puppets in the dirty positions? Is it Dana or Bruce?
Well, actually, it's the fans, I have to say, because they've got freehold and can do with them what they may, So I have never seen a cast member with an ashy slash
really?
beyond the show, so
Yeah.
I'm on par with you, I'm afraid.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those puppets, they are pretty cool. And I was so happy because I remember when they first showed it, I was like, they have to really make those so that we can get them.
Yeah.
And yeah, because who
a big
doesn't
trend.
want it? Yeah.
I want 3 at least.
Yeah.
I want one for every day of the week so that I can constantly be cycling them through the wash. I want to take one everywhere I go with me. I want it to be like the South Park teacher with the puppet all the time.
Yeah,
Just me
Mr.
and
Hat.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm very curious about jumping off of puppets for a second. I'm really curious about, you mentioned being turned on to, say, Texas Chainsaw Massacre when you were about 14 years old. Where does that align on the timeline? Where does that compare to the moment where you decided, oh, okay, not only do I have this love and fascination for entertainment, but I want to be a part of creating entertainment? Like, when did you decide, okay, acting, that's the direction I want to move in?
You know, that's a really good question. I think when I was a younger actor, I think I started when I was 13 odd. So it was all around the same sort of time. And there were 2 factors that really impressed me about a life in acting. One is that you can, as an artist, shine a light on the detail of the world that you live in. And I think filmmaking literally is a very specific frame, specific lens that can make, you know, millions of people go, look at this. Do you know what I mean? So there was that facet. And then also just the imaginative realm, you know, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. And so that's then about aligning yourself with good creators. So I started in, you know, television that was, you know, my Australian sort of hospital dramas, and I think everyone's heard of like Home and Away and those sorts of shows where, you know, you're on the beach and it's all pleasant, but then slowly as you make your way on, you find yourself 20 years later inside the middle of the murky undergrowth of beautiful New Zealand, you know, covered in blood and gore after, you know, 7 hours in makeup and seeing all the crazy things that go on. And it takes you all around the world. It's a fascinating and fun job. I think that's why I love it.
Yeah, and at least you're surrounded by blood and gore as opposed to like jizz and butts like Ash, you know,
like
sometimes
Ash
on the
gets
show.
to do.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Bruce really, he does hit the limits. Like he finds the limits and then just crosses them, and he does it better than anyone else. The thing about Bruce Campbell, you know, when I first met him, he comes in and he nails it in one take. Like there is no sort of need for him to rehearse because he's an artisan at what he does. He's brilliant. So to try and just absorb as much of that from him, you know, and just the Bruce Campbell energy. I was saying to you just before, you know, when we come out, when we went to Comic-Con, literally Bruce Campbell walks out on stage and the walls vibrate and people throw like underwear and well, Bruce threw money back, but it was, you know, it's just him. So
Yeah, because Ash is so much a part of Bruce in a way. Do you feel like Dalton is any part of you? Yeah.
Wow, well, something that Dalton and I share in common. Dalton's story is kind of one about ancestry and lineage, and it was actually only this year, because I'm quarter Maori, and so it was only this year, and there was a lot of synchronicity I found out about all of my Maori heritage. And you know that my family are linked to a chieftain tribe in the south part of New Zealand, and that we're descended from the Moriori, which are from the Chatham Islands, which is, you know, kind of even older than the Maoris themselves. And so I was discovering all of this sort of lineage story about myself and my New Zealand and Maori heritage, just as I was kind of entering Dalton and creating his ancestry as well, you know, and something. I worked with Rob and Bruce, and particularly Barb, who was our costume designer, and we had these really interesting discussions about what that lineage might be and where it would come from. So we went back to the original films and scoured through, pulling out as much detail as we could. And so one of the things we came up with was this Knights of Sumeria ring, which was just like a sort of signet ring for the family. But we were talking about what maybe his element was, like whether fire or wind or water, and we're talking about if he has a spirit animal and if that's a lion or a wolf or whatever, and we couldn't kind of land on anything. So I went back to the original sort of Sumerian mythology, like the true mythology, which is around Mesopotamia, and which we now know as Syria and Iraq, and dug out all of these old legends and found this thing called the Anzu bird, which is an eagle, basically, with the head of a lion and the body of a bird, who can breathe fire and water. So that's kind of, Dalton wears a wristband, and if you have a look at that wristband, there's the Anzu bird on that. So there's like all of this old mythology that we've worked together to thread in, and that are like Easter eggs for the diehard fans.
Yeah, and that's what I love about this show, is they have Easter eggs, and not even just from like stuff like that, even other horror mythologies, like, you know, you've seen stuff from Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th. And you know, they really care about their fans, and they reward people with these little details. And like you say, I mean, you were a part of coming up with all these little things, and that's what I love about this show.
It's really exciting too to see when fans just latch on and kind of open up the mythology themselves too. And I don't know about everyone else, but I'm really interested to see what the fans come up with, because they're the expert. You've got this database of, like, you know, what, 1 million people that are scouring the world for details and exciting things to build out, and I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, because even your character's name, Dalton, and how he kind of looks like an 80s badass, is he named after Roadhouse? Because my nephew is, like, and his name is Dalton, so it's like, yeah, I'm like, that's the only Dalton you know, right?
I've never asked the question. You might be right. I'll have to check with Mike.
Yeah, it has to be from Roadhouse, and let us know. Tweet us when you figure out. Look, you know, Roadhouse is a great film. Have you ever seen it?
I haven't seen it. No,
yeah,
I don't.
It's Patrick Swayze at his best.
Doesn't he just like crane rip a dude's throat out in the
Yes, he
climax of
does.
that movie? That alone, you gotta do. Oh, you'll love it.
Crane rip?
Like he takes his pluck it, almost like in Kill Bill when she plucks the dude's eye out.
Oh,
A little bit like that, but goes right for the dude's throat and it just leaves his body. It's amazing.
That sounds like our show. That sounds like
It's
Dalton.
not dissimilar.
You know, we're gonna say yes. That's
Yeah,
what
that's why I
Dalton
was
got in
like,
there.
yeah.
From the crane rip.
Yep. Yeah, so do you get to do any crane rips, huh?
Look, I mean, Dalton he does have a bunch of skill sets that I think are unique, because he does come from the Sumerian sort of upskilling. One of the things we see in 302 is that he recognizes Pablo's tattoos and he can read them. So within that sort of struct, and his backstory with Kelly, you know, if you imagine that Dalton's this guy that's kind of cruising around America on the back of a motorbike looking for evil. He's heard about this prophesized one sort of guy, and he runs into Kelly at a bar, and, you know, he's got the theory, but he's kind of never had to face it one-on-one. And I think, you know, he wasn't expecting Coogie to be the first manifest of evil that he's got to confront. So I think he's got a lot to learn as well. But that trade-off between him and Kelly, I think, is where, you know, he's got the most to learn. She's like, I'll introduce you to evil and you can teach me a couple of things, but I don't think he's expecting a school mascot to come and try and kick the prophesied one's ass, you know?
No. Yes. And too, what an introduction to be the first one you see, because the Coogie death was very emotional for Lex here.
I tell you what, man, it was something about the imagery of the mascot with the blood coming out of every hole, man. It did something. It sat in a very specific place in my heart.
Oh,
and I'm
really?
still processing it. Couldn't explain why.
Oh, did you have a school mascot?
Nope.
No?
No idea why it is. And it's not, obviously, you know, there's a person inside the suit, right? So maybe something terrible happened to that guy. Not worried about that guy. For some reason, just the mascot, the suit of it all, like just this symbol, what is ostensibly supposed to be like this symbol of like innocence and school spirit and all of that, now it's trying to eat the nice girls.
Ash vs. Evil Dead Season 3 may make you reflect on your childhood insecurities, possibly loves, hopes, dreams, aspirations.
Well, that's what Ash vs. Evil Dead always does for me, is, you know, make me reflect on my childhood, but probably because my dad was a little bit similar to Ash, and would also let us watch the Evil Dead movies.
Hand?
Yeah, like, you know, it was really difficult to get hugs that way.
Well, Ash just detaches too, so... Yeah.
And it is funny to see Ash being a dad. So you were familiar with the franchise itself. How do you like this season changing this perspective on the character?
You know, I think you hit a really interesting point, which is because the franchise is so old, I feel like we do or have engaged with it at some point in our youth. You know, you've either heard of it or seen the images, or the references are so prolific and everywhere that I think that, you know, you do have that ancient sort of thing that is quite primal and almost part of your youth or development, that then does come into the 21st century with the new special effects, the new blood, the new gore, the new storylines. I mean, look, you look at the last episode, 302, and it's nothing like you can possibly imagine. I mean, that's the thing about this show. They keep stepping up everything, you know, whether it be from fighting a colon to fighting in a sperm bank to like where does this show go?
Yeah, that's what I love. Whenever they said we're going to try to top the butt this year, it was like, how are you going to do that? And it's like, all right, 302 did that.
Yeah.
And it really is like you throw down the gauntlet real hard, real early in the season, because if you make a list in your head of things that you assume this show, like there's got to be a line somewhere, right? So the line must be semen fight. And then right up top in the season, no, we got semen fight out of the way, which means you cannot possibly be prepared for where the season will take you from that point.
Well, I can tell you, because I know what happens,
Ooh, wow.
that it does step it all up a notch. Like there are things towards the end of this season that I have never seen Ash versus Evil Dead, let alone Evil Dead, go near before. I mean, you've seen from the trailers, we got tanks.
Yep. It's like, I know, I'm just like,
we needed a second.
I know, we
right
were
there.
like, tanks. Ooh. Because how fun is in the tank? Do you get to play in the tank at all?
Do I get to?
Yeah.
Oh, does Dalton drive a tank? Dalton's vehicle of choice is a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So,
which is always cool.
Which is always cool. And a tank is a really complex sort of, I think, vehicle to drive. You know, motorcycle, you got one handlebar. Tank, you got levers everywhere. I'll leave that to... Would you leave that to Ash?
Yeah, that's probably the worst person to pick, probably.
I'd pick Kelly, actually,
Yeah.
to be driving tanks.
Yeah, that's the thing is Kelly is by far the smartest character in the room usually, especially when it comes to her and Ash. She's always pointing out Dahl, and you know, you come in with Kelly. Is there any extra layers of your relationship with Kelly? I know we've all been speculating about Dalton and Kelly having a thing, and Pablo, the
Certainly
most of
been
us.
speculating,
Yeah.
Look, I think that, you know, the Kelly and Dalton are two sides of the same coin, you know, in that the last time we see Kelly at the end of season 2, she's not happy to set up shop and start a dildo emporium. You know, she wants to stay in the fight, and she says that, you know, and so there's this sort of drive that she's got, and Dalton, who's this kind of a story of identity and trying to adhere to this mythology that if you I imagine all the other knights are off becoming dentists and physiotherapists, or physical therapists as you call them here, and you know, lawyers. Why would you cling to this ancient thing expecting it to come back? And so Dalton and Kelly share that sort of symbiosis and drive and need for something more. So I think particularly the rift that happens with Dalton and Pablo that we catch a glimpse of is probably less about personalities conflicting and the fact that he's got Sumerian writing all over his body, and that maybe Dalton knows what it means. And so, you know, that warning that comes in season 2, I think we do possibly get to see where that goes in the next episode.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because I know that Dalton's certainly, you know, worried about Pablo because he has evil on him with the Sumerian writing. And 2, I don't, you know, feel that Dalton feels that Pablo is a threat in any other way. But yeah, like, you and Kelly, huh?
Look at you. Keep pushing the button.
Yeah.
You'll have to watch the show. Tune in Starz, app only, 8 p.m. on Sundays, Feb 25.
Yeah. Well, okay. So yeah, enough of the Kelly talk. How do you feel at least about the term she has for Pablo being her powerful vagina? Has she revealed this to Dalton at all?
Yeah, I think Dalton and Kelly have talked about Pablo and the fact that there's a triumvirate. I think it's, you know, her having this big history with the evil and Dalton's complete lack of awareness of it that means that she wants to pull him in and she wants him to integrate, you know, because he's got all of this knowledge. The big speech that Dalton has in 302, it was actually when I first met Bruce, we were at a party, and he's got his tequila, and I was like, I gotta go and say hello. I hadn't met him yet, and I went, "G'day, I'm Lindsay," and he was like, "Oh, you're the new guy." And I was like, "Oh, but that's appropriate." And he was like, "Yeah, you're shooting tomorrow," and I was like, "Yes." He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've got this big speech where basically I explain the entire backstory of what the Knights of Sumeria are, what's going to happen." Da, da, da. And Bruce was like, "Oh yeah, I have one of those," which was season 1, ep 1, where he has to explain what he's been doing since the cabin in the woods. And I was like, "Oh, well, have you got any advice?" And he took a minute, and he had this shit-eating grin, and he goes, "Yeah, good luck with that. And that was my intro to the show. And because, you know, we were still writing and that was the early days, that was literally my first and last shot of the whole season, because the writers were tweaking the story as we go on, and we're figuring out who Kaya is and the sorceress, or the, you know, the betrayal, and so it was also the very last shot, and I think possibly maybe the last shot of the entire shoot involving the cast. So yeah, I forgot what your question was.
Hell, so did I. Right. But yeah, and you mentioned Kaya, so that will play a bigger part in this season. Is there anything you can tell us about maybe Dalton and this revelation of who Kaya is, maybe? And is there any kind of connection, especially with the writing on Pablo as well? Is that going to be part of it?
Well, I think the thing about Dalton is, you know, he knows about the legends around Kaya. He knows about the Necronomicon, but he still doesn't quite know that it exists in the world that we're in. You know what I mean? Like, so he knows the sort of rules and the way that it's all bound together, but he's discovering it as we do. You know, he's never seen the Necronomicon in action. So, you know, we know that Kaya is bound within that book. Do we see her again? Do we need a tank to kill her?
Yeah. These do seem like good reasons. Yeah.
But so yeah. So yeah, I think, you know, Dalton shares the ride with the audience a lot, because he's discovering things as the season goes on for the first time as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is he's sort of the character that we're able to most relate to, because this is all new to him, and he's just sort of like, you know, and also we probably would bow down to Ash when we met him as well.
I feel like we do on this show. The longer the show goes, the more POV characters we sort of lose, not because they're murdered, although some of them are, but because if they're not, eventually they get used to it, and they're no longer our surrogate.
You've got to do that to survive. So I guess that, yeah, a good question is, can Dalton learn the ropes quick enough? Because evil moves pretty damn quick in our show.
We had a conversation, I think the first week, and we're all very concerned about Dalton.
Yeah.
Well, you have to stick around.
Ooh. Yeah. Ominous.
Just a lot of humming.
Yeah. Yeah, because maybe Dalton just decides to run Ashy Slashy's hardware store and sex toy emporium.
Maybe he gets a job too. You know, someone pointed this out the other day, or maybe it's in the thing, but you know, the Knights of Samaria started in the 1400s too, and we're talking about a show about lineage and that sort of thing. But Dalton kind of is a Knight of Samaria around when Ash was back in the 1400s too.
Yeah, so maybe Dalton and Ash are related. You know, this season is about family.
It is about family.
And that actually was another one of our predictions.
Was it?
So yeah.
Oh. We did talk about this, didn't we? I just remember my profound overriding concern.
Yeah.
Concern for me?
Yes, for your safety. Everyone, no, because our conversation was like almost every time they bring in a couple of new characters, at least 50% of them die horribly. And we're going, what are the odds that they're going to introduce a daughter for Ash and then kill her horribly?
Yeah.
That only leaves you.
That only leaves me.
We're frightened.
Yeah, I hear you.
Well, you know, since Ash vs. Evil Dead is a short season, and you probably have plenty of time, even if Dalton does survive this season, is there anything else you'd like to promote as we start to wrap up here?
Do you know what I had to say? You had Ariel on here, and you're talking about Australian vernacular.
Yes, are we here to fuck spiders?
Yeah, we're not here to fuck spiders. There's a film that I'm about to, I think it comes out in Australia at the end of the year, which has that very title, called We're Not Here to Fuck Spiders, and I just bring that up to notice too. And also, it's International Women's Day today. So a shout out to you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And all the badass women on our show, like Lucy and
Dana and Ariel. Yeah, y'all have such good ladies, but now we've got, you know, the great guys too. Now we've got add you. Now it's more even. Yeah.
More even.
Yeah.
I think it is an equal playing field now, isn't it? 3 guys, 3 girls.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if this were a soap opera, y'all will be, you know, hanging out with each other. But luckily it's Ash vs. Evil Dead, so there's just blood and stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah. Well, because it's, you know, bodily fluids, body parts, you know, stuff.
It's your stuff. It is all under the stuff umbrella. That's true.
All under the stuff umbrella. So, as we wrap up here, where can they keep up the conversation with you on social media?
Lindsay J. Farris are my handles. That's on Instagram and Twitter. LINDSAYJFARRIS.
All right, and how about you, Lex? Where can they keep up the conversation with you?
I am all over social media at the Lex Michael, and also on the Missing Out podcast with Tari J. Miller, which is all over the podcast sphere, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Podbean, and on Twitter at Missing Outcast.
And I'm Lacretia Lyon, guys. You can always find me at LACRETIALYON anywhere on the internet, since there is only one. And I too have a podcast. It's called Mrs. Brightside. Same thing. You can find it on pretty well all the podcast apps, iTunes, Google Play, wherever. It's a nice little fun comedy, motivational podcast, trying to keep everything light and fun, kind of like Ash does. We talk about even horror on the next week's episode with Megan Salinas from the Ash vs. Evil Dead after show, and we also have a lot of other people, probably Lex soon, and who knows. So just be sure to subscribe and like and comment, whatever you want to do there. And thank you guys so much for watching.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Jizz you later.
Splat.
Those are the host only, do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.